Hi, my name is Shayna Bayo, and I will be talking about GUIs, Graphical User Interfaces. A GUI widget is a part of the GUI. They are graphic control elements that help control the appearance of your GUI, and they're combinable and reusable, and they make up the whole of the GUI. So I will be showing layout managers, specifically three common layout managers: flow layout, grid layout, and border layout. First, a layout helps with managing the layout of your GUI, so you don't have to specify every size and position of your components. When you use a layout manager, you have to put the components inside a container, like a content pane or panel, and then create the layout manager object. So for this example, it's a flow layout. Let me run this, and it's right here. This is the flow layout. This is the default layout for JPanel objects. The components, which are 3 buttons for this particular example, are the 3 buttons, and they're layout in rows. So I basically have the main container, which is the JPanel, and then the components, I created the J buttons, and then you add those buttons to the panel. Now here is an example of a border layout manager. This is the default layout for JFrame objects content pane. Normally it's laid out in a north, south, east, west, and center regions. That's 5 regions. I decided to only do 3 regions, the north, center, and south one. I did not do the east and west side, just because I didn't feel like it. But it's still similar to the way you would do a flow layout, in that you still have to add the components, which are the buttons, to a container. In this specific instance, it's the content pane of the JFrame. But you could actually create panels, JPanels, and then add those components, buttons, into the JPanels. And that way you can make the buttons smaller, at least visually look smaller, but I decided not to show that. But normally for a border layout, each region only can have one component at a time, and they fill up the whole area. And the center region is normally the default region. Now here's an example of a grid layout, which is also similar to the other layouts. The only difference for grid layout is that it's laid out in grids with rows and columns. So for this particular example, I am adding the components, the buttons, to the content pane of the JFrame. Now I will be talking about another example of GUIs. When I run this code that I have, I created a new code called GUI examples 2. This one's a little bit more complicated. I created a GUI with 3 JPanels and a grid layout. The first JPanel has a JLabel inside of it. The second one has a JPanel with J buttons inside, and then another one has radio buttons inside that JPanel. This has a lot of examples of things you can do in it. It shows interactivity to a widget through event handling. When you click on these buttons, something happens. It'll show button 1 clicked. If you click that, button 2 clicked. If you click on the radio buttons, it changes the colors of a different widget. This shows an example of how to change the state of a widget based on an event triggered by a different widget. The way you do this is that, let me show the code right here. I made it so that I kind of changed the code up so that I'm separating and organizing everything by panels. So the first method builds the text panel, and then the button panel, and then the radio panel. To basically handle event handling, you would create a listener that implements an action listener. So for the radio button ones, I have a radio button listener, and then you have action performed method. And that way, when you say that the button is selected, it will create how to change the color. This is also an example of how to change colors in a widget. You would just type in the component and then set background and then color, blah, blah, blah. And that's how you show that. In the same way, for the buttons, I also implemented an action listener also, where you would register action listener and and an action event. In this one, I have a pop-up window, a J option pane that shows up and says, hey, button 1 is clicked, button 2 is clicked, button 3 is clicked. Oh, and I forgot, I should also show how you change the font of a widget. I did that, where did I do that? I cannot remember, but I did it somewhere. Right here. When I'm building the button panel, I decided to change the font here. And all you have to do is put in the component and you do set font, new font, and the name of that font. You can also make it plain, bold, or italic, and you can also change the size right there. I think I also did it for the message label. I changed the font and everything. So if you see it right here, the font is different. I even made it a little bit bigger, and I made each of the buttons different also. So that's way you can see how I changed the font for there, and also how I changed the colors also. So that is an example of GUIs. Thank you and have a good day.